Hey teachers, would you like to use Google Docs with your students on iTalki or on any other language learning platform? Well, today I'm going to share my screen with you and I'm going to show you exactly how I use Google Docs with my students. So let's begin. Okay, teachers, so together we're just going to go through some of the basic features of Google Docs to start off. So these are my Google Docs right here. Imagine we're starting with a blank folder here, so we could open up this file. Great. So the first thing that you would want to do typically is to name your file. All right, and you will notice that a lot of my files have the name of my student, iTalki, and then they will have the type of class, and then they will have the student's name. So, or my name, pardon me. So for example, let's go with Sinsu, iTalki, IELTS, Ryan. That's an example right there. A lot of the time, however, I'll just have iTalki Ryan. I won't even put IELTS or the name of the specific course that we're doing. I'll talk later about where I put all that information. Okay, so as you see here, we have File, Edit, View, Insert, Format, Tools, Add-ons, etc. So I'm just going to talk about all I have had to use as a teacher, all right? So if we go to File, a lot of this is self-explanatory. They have the Share tab there, but there's an easier way to do it. So a couple functions you may need is first of all to download. So right here, you could download the doc as a Word doc or as a PDF if you would like. Aside from that, you could make a copy. So this could be very useful if you want to duplicate the files that you have with numerous students. So I found that useful. Aside from that, there isn't really anything else that I have had to use from all of these options. So let's just keep it simple for today, right? So the most useful functions from File is to download, of course. So imagine you finish a course with a student and you just want to send them your old Google Doc so they have everything in a PDF nice and tidy. You could do that. And aside from that, make a copy could be useful. If you would like to share, you could just go here. It's a lot more kind of blatant and open and obvious for you right here. So if you click share, oops, here's what will happen. Oh, my apologies. Come out here. So we go to share. So right here, it's important for you to check these settings right here because sometimes depending on which email you're using, it will be restricted. So you want to check to make sure it's anyone with a link. And if you're using this with a student, you will typically want it to be editor so that your student could make changes. If you only want your student to be able to comment, then you would click commenter. And if you would only like your student to be a viewer, then you would click viewer. So basically, if you want your student to be able to just look at something and you don't want them to alter it or change it, just keep it at viewer. Otherwise, you might want to go for editor. And you would only want to go to commenter if you want feedback on something. If you want, maybe you share a document with your student and you would like for them to highlight and comment on different parts of maybe on different key points, right? So I'll talk a little bit after how you could comment on things, but that's the only situation where you would make it a commenter, okay? Awesome. So that is the share tab right there. Okay. Now let's go back to this panel right here. We've already spoken about file. If you want to rename, you could just click on this right here. So Sinsu iTalki Ryan IELTS. Or for me, I would put number 1 or number 2 or number 3. Some of my students, we've gone through like 6 Google Docs. Usually I will use the Google Doc up to 25 pages and then we'll start a new one. Okay, anyway, let's get back to it. So we have edit. Um, For edit, it would be useful for you to get used to some of the shortcuts so you don't have to go here and click edit. Some useful shortcuts could be, for example, to paste, you would just click Command and V, or to copy is Command and C. So those kinds of things would be useful for you to learn. Honestly, they seem a little bit intimidating, but for me, they have been life-changing. I only learned about these in the past year, these different shortcuts. And I could make a new video on shortcuts in the future if you'd like. But honestly, they've made things so much easier, like undo. So if you make a mistake, you could just click Command Z or Z if you're Canadian. Or you could always just go here to undo and click this little button here. Okay, aside from that, we have view. I have never had to use view for anything. But again, maybe you want to use Google Docs in a way I haven't. So you don't have to restrict yourself to how I'm using it. But I just want to keep things simple. Even here, like maybe you could use it for page numbers if you want to. I never use page numbers with my students. It's not a formal essay, so it doesn't really matter. Page breaks could be useful as well, but again, I haven't had to use page breaks. That's basically when you want a page to end at a certain place, like the text to end. So for example, I could say, I am Ryan, the teacher. Okay. And if I insert a page break, so insert, where are we? Page break, then it automatically goes to the next page. Yeah, so nothing else goes in here in this white space here. It goes to the next page. So again, I've only used this in my academic life. You may want to use it, but I don't really think so. Format, some of these could be very useful if you want to format the text, but again, you could just use the bold, italics, underline right there. Yeah, so that could be useful, but honestly, I've only really used it for academic English with my students. All right. So one of the most important things you are going to find in Google Docs is right here in the tools. So a couple important tools, of course, spelling and grammar. So if you want suggestions to be shown for spelling and grammar, you keep the check mark here. If you don't want it to be shown, you click on it so it's not there anymore. So for example, you am a nice guy, right? So see, they show me the grammar error right there because the grammar, it show grammar suggestions. But if I click that, I don't see it, right? So this is very important with your students. If you want your students to be able to, kind of go with the training wheels off, so to speak, so they are writing and there is no crutch, there is no grammar check, then you want that to be turned off, okay? And the second very important thing I'd say is the word count, okay? So for the word count, if you just click tools, so I'll zoom in here, tools, word count, boom. And this changed the world for me. This changed everything. You're able to see the amount of words that are on the page. If you want to focus on a specific part of the page, so let's say she was nice to me. Let's say I just want to focus here. I hover over it, so I highlight it, and then I go to tools, word count, and it's only 5 of 8. See, 5 of 8. Right? So it's highlighted on 5 of the 8 words. That's really useful as well, especially because for homework, I typically give my students an amount of words that they have to write to. Okay, so that's it for this panel up here. Okay, now other useful panels I've found, it could be the font, but I don't really change the font very much. It could be the size. So for example, if you want to emphasize different parts of the article, you could definitely change the size for sure. Bold, italicize, underline, all of that could be useful stylistically. And I also find highlighting is really useful. So again, you would just hover over it and then change the color, right? And that's really useful for when you are, highlighting errors or highlighting good things. So it could be, this is spelled correctly, so you highlight it yellow, and then this is spelled incorrectly. Well, it's not spelled how my name's supposed to be spelled, so you highlight it purple, for example. That's a little bit too dark, so that's something to remember too. Typically I go for one of these shades, yeah, so it's a bit lighter, but that's just me. Okay, so that's pretty much all you need. I mean, everything else, I think you will pick up as you go along, all right? For commenting, this is important too. You could add a comment right here. So, she was nice to me. You could add the comment, correct grammar. Like that, or it would be better to say, this grammar is correct. Well done. See? Something like that. Okay? So that's a little bit for commenting right there. And I'll show you more of that in the future. Okay? If any of this is not clear, just send me a message on Patreon and let me know, and I'll make sure that I get another video out going more in depth. The final thing that I found to be very, very important is this function right here. Okay, so the mode that you are in. Editing mode, suggesting mode, viewing mode. So particularly editing versus suggesting. So if you're editing, that just means you're writing regularly. Yeah, she was so funny. Okay. Now, if you go to suggesting mode, basically this is a very useful editing tool. And that's why it's a little bit confusing, the terminology, because I use suggesting mode to edit my students' work, but I use editing mode to edit the document itself, right? So for example, so funny. We don't really need all those O's, so I could backspace. So I hover over, and then I backspace, I delete, and then I could just write so. So this shows what I have crossed out because that is incorrect, and this shows what the correct version is. Funny. Maybe you could cross that out and put hilarious. Funny is not incorrect, but hilarious is a higher level word, right? So you could do that, and then you could actually add a comment. Hilarious is a higher level word. Right? Like it's more of an advanced term, for example. I wouldn't give a student this feedback in reality probably, but if you're teaching IELTS or you're teaching some sort of intensive writing, it could be useful. All right? Okay, so now let's So this is my student Alex. I taught him today. So this is what our document looks like. Alex and iTalki Volume 2. We have the course at the top. This is the course that he's taking. His Jamboard, a link to his Jamboard, a link to his SoundCloud, and his progress report. This is where I slot in all of his lines. As you can all see, he's been doing very, very well, completing all of his homework, so I'm very happy about that. And he's quickly approaching the midterm stage, so quite soon he will be completing his e-portfolio, which is the first major assignment in the course. Okay, so for each class, I put the date and the topic, okay? And then we go through, I have activity 1, so we go through activity 1, go through activity 2, blah, blah, blah. And then we have VGP, positive feedback, constructive criticism, recommendations. And then the homework for next time, right? So V stands for vocabulary. So he didn't make any vocabulary mistakes that I took note of. G, he made more grammatical mistakes. P, pronunciation, he didn't make any notable pronunciation mistakes. And, dealing with corrective feedback could be tricky. So I'll talk more in the future about that. Typically, I will put positive feedback, but sometimes I won't put positive feedback or constructive criticism because I will explain it to the student. So in this situation, I didn't put any. Okay, and then this is his homework for next time, right? So that is in a nutshell what I do. Now, this was one of the tasks that he completed. We see here. So you see exactly what I did. This is a name, a proper noun. It should be capitalized. So I deleted the lowercase n and I slotted in an uppercase n, right? And I used suggesting mode. So again, I would change from editing to suggesting, and then I would ba 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 ba. Then it's suggesting. Okay. So, folks, that is everything I think you need to know in order to get started with Google Docs with your students. I really hope that's helpful, and I could definitely go deeper into this in the future. Okay, and that's basically it. That's how I use Google Docs with my students. So again, to my patrons, thank you so much for supporting me right here on Patreon. And if you're watching this on YouTube, consider heading over to my Patreon and supporting my channel. And until next time, keep smiling.